The stars have always been patient. They burn for billions of years, indifferent to the brief flickers of civilizations that rise and fall beneath their ancient light. They do not mourn the empires that crumble, nor celebrate the species that first reach toward them with trembling hands. They simply exist, eternal witnesses to the endless cycle of ambition and ruin that defines sentient life across the cosmos. In the grand arithmetic of the universe, even the mightiest civilization is little more than a rounding error, a momentary arrangement of matter that believes itself significant before dissolving back into the void from which it came. I have had 10,000 years to contemplate this truth. 10,000 years of watching the sovereignty expand across 3 galactic arms, of seeing our fleets darken the skies of 100,000 worlds, of believing, truly believing, that we had transcended the cycle, that we were different, that our careful stewardship of the younger races, our mastery of sciences that bent reality itself to our will, had earned us a permanence that the universe had never before granted. I was wrong. My name is Kethvarim, and I am the last High Arbiter of the Velketh sovereignty. I am writing this account not as history, for there may be no one left to read history, but as confession, as testimony, as the final words of a species that learned humility too late and paid for that lesson with everything we were. The observation deck of the eternal vigil was silent save for the soft hum of failing life support systems. Through the crystalline viewport, I watched the debris field that had once been our 3rd fleet, 4,000 warships reduced to tumbling wreckage in less than 3 hours. The harvesters had come without warning, as they always did, their biomechanical swarms erupting from fold space with the precision of a plague and the hunger of a void. We had fought. We had always fought. But for the first time in our recorded history, fighting had not been enough. High Arbiter. The voice belonged to Centaur, my aide for the past 3 centuries. She stood at the threshold of the observation deck, her silver scales dimmed with exhaustion and grief. The Council requests your presence. There has been a development. Another fleet lost? I did not turn from the viewport. I could not bear to see the hope draining from another face. No, High Arbiter. There was something strange in her voice. Not hope. We had abandoned hope 6 cycles ago, when the harvesters consumed the nursery worlds. Something else. Something I could not identify. A contact. A single vessel has entered the outer system. One of ours? No. She paused, and I heard her draw a breath that seemed to cost her something. The scanners detected one contact. Human. Then, silence. I turned then, slowly, feeling the weight of my years in every joint and tendon. Human? Confirmed, High Arbiter. A diplomatic vessel. They are requesting permission to dock. Humans. Of all the bitter ironies the universe could have offered in our final hours, it had chosen this one. The species we had dismissed for 3 centuries. The primitive mammals from that unremarkable yellow star. The ones we had quarantined to their own system because we could not decide if they were more dangerous to themselves or to others. The ones we had watched with a mixture of condescension and unease as they clawed their way from nuclear fire to fusion drives in barely 2 of their generations. The ones we had refused to help when they asked. Send them away, I said. We have nothing to offer them, and they have nothing that can help us. High Arbiter, with respect, the Council has already granted docking permission. The human vessel is approaching Bay 7. I closed my eyes. Even in death, it seemed, I was not to be spared the consequences of our arrogance. Very well, I will meet them myself. The walk to Base 7 took me through corridors that had once gleamed with the light of 1,000 bioluminescent murals, masterworks of our greatest artists depicting the glory of the sovereignty across 1,000,000 years. Now half of them were dark, their living canvases dying along with the ship that housed them. I passed crew members who stood aside and lowered their gazes as I approached, not out of respect, I knew, but out of shame. We had failed them. We had promised them that the sovereignty was eternal, that our wisdom and power would protect them from any threat the universe could produce. We had lied. Bay 7 was a small docking facility designed for diplomatic shuttles and courier vessels. The human ship that occupied it was unremarkable. A boxy, utilitarian craft, perhaps 40 meters in length, its hull scarred with micrometeorite impacts and patched with what appeared to be mismatched alloys. No elegant curves, no ceremonial flourishes, no display of wealth or power. It looked like a tool, a working vessel designed by people who cared more about function than impression. The airlock cycled open, and they emerged. There were 3 of them, 2 males and 1 female, if I was reading their morphology correctly. They wore simple gray uniforms with no visible insignia beyond a small patch on their shoulders, a blue circle containing what I had learned was a stylized representation of their homeworld. They moved with an easy confidence that I found oddly unsettling. Their eyes, those strange forward-facing predator's eyes, taking in everything without appearing to stare at anything in particular. The female stepped forward. She was small, even by human standards, with dark hair cut short and a face that bore the lines of someone who had seen difficult things and continued on regardless. When she spoke, her voice was calm, not cold, not warm, simply calm, in a way that suggested she had cultivated that calmness deliberately, as a tool. High Arbiter Kethverum, I'm Commander Sarah Chen, representing the United Earth Government. Thank you for allowing us to dock. I inclined my head slightly, the formal greeting of equals that I had never expected to offer a human. Commander Chen, I confess I am surprised by your presence. The Sol quarantine has been in effect for 300 of your years. How did you pass the boundary stations? Something flickered in her eyes, a shadow of something that might have been amusement or might have been something darker. The boundary stations are gone, High Arbiter. The harvesters consumed them 6 weeks ago, along with the garrison fleet at Proxima Station. I felt the words like a physical blow. Proxima Station. 800 warships, 12 million crew members. Gone. We had received no distress signal, no warning, simply silence. I see, I said, because there was nothing else to say. We monitored the battle from long-range sensors, Commander Chen continued, her voice still that same unsettling calm. Your forces fought bravely, but the harvesters have adapted. The weapon frequencies that worked against them in your early engagements are no longer effective. They learn. Yes, I studied her face, searching for the mockery I expected to find there, the satisfaction of the weak watching the mighty fall. I found nothing but patience. They learn, and we die. Is that why you've come, Commander, to witness our end? She was silent for a moment. Then she shook her head. A simple human gesture that I had learned indicated negation. No, High Arbiter, we've come to offer our assistance. The words hung in the air between us, absurd and impossible. I felt my secondary hearts stutter in something that might have been shock or might have been the beginning of hysterical amusement. "Your assistants," I repeated. "Commander, I mean no disrespect, but your species possesses perhaps 200 interstellar-capable vessels. The sovereignty, what remains of it, commands 40,000. The harvesters have consumed approximately 12,000 of our ships in the past cycle alone. What assistance could you possibly offer?" Commander Chen's expression did not change. "May I speak frankly, High Arbiter? Given the circumstances, I cannot imagine what you could say that would make our situation worse." She nodded, a small acknowledgement. 300 years ago, we sent a delegation to the Sovereignty. We were new to interstellar travel, eager, perhaps naive. We asked for knowledge, for alliance, for the opportunity to learn from the elder races and contribute what we could. I remembered. I had been present at that council session, though I had not been High Arbiter then. I remembered the human ambassador, a tall, earnest male who had spoken passionately about cooperation and shared destiny. I remembered the laughter that had rippled through the chamber when he finished speaking, the gentle condescension in the voices of the High Council as they explained that humanity was too young, too volatile, too dangerous to be trusted with the knowledge they sought. "You quarantined us," Commander Chen continued, "surrounded our system with monitoring stations and patrol fleets, warned the other spacefaring races not to contact us. For 3 centuries we existed in isolation, with nothing but our own resources and our own ingenuity." "We believed it was for the best," I said, and even as the words left my mouth, I heard how hollow they sounded. "Your species had nearly destroyed itself with nuclear weapons. Your history was a litany of war and genocide. We feared what you might become with access to our technologies." I know. There was no anger in her voice, no accusation, just that same steady calm. We understood, eventually. We stopped being angry about it. And we used those 3 centuries. Something in her tone made me pause. Use them how? For the first time, Commander Chen smiled. It was a small expression, barely a curve of her lips, but it transformed her face in ways I found difficult to analyze. "We learned, High Arbiter. Without access to your technologies, we developed our own. Without your guidance, we made our own mistakes and found our own solutions. Without your protection, we prepared for the day when we might need to protect ourselves." She reached into her uniform and withdrew a small device, a data crystal in a format I didn't recognize. "This contains technical specifications for a weapon system we've developed. It's designed specifically to counter adaptive threats like the harvesters. We believe it will be effective." I stared at the crystal in her outstretched hand. "You're offering us a weapon?" "We're offering you a chance," she said. "We monitored the harvesters' approach through your space. We've analyzed their patterns, their behaviors, their adaptation mechanisms. They're not invincible. They just haven't met anything yet that could adapt faster than they can." I did not take the crystal, not yet. Why? The question emerged from somewhere deep within me, from the place where 10,000 years of certainty had crumbled into dust. We abandoned you. We left you to struggle alone while we enjoyed the fruits of our advanced civilization. We mocked your ambassador and dismissed your species as primitive. Why would you help us? Commander Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked past me, through the viewport at the stars beyond, and when she spoke again, her voice carried something that I had not expected, something that sounded almost like compassion. "High Arbiter, do you know what the first thing we did was after the quarantine was established?" "I do not." We argued about it. For years. There were factions who wanted to find a way to break through your blockade, to force contact. Others who wanted to turn inward, to forget the stars entirely and focus on Earth. Some who wanted revenge for what they saw as humiliation. She paused. But eventually, we decided something else. We decided to prove you wrong.
Wrong? You called us volatile, dangerous. You said we couldn't be trusted. So we spent 3 centuries becoming the species you should have seen in us. She met my gaze directly, and I saw in her eyes a depth of purpose that I had never expected to find in a human. We're here because helping people who once hurt us is what humans do. We're here because letting a civilization die when we could have saved them would make us exactly what you feared we were.
I took the crystal. The data it contained was extraordinary. Not because the technology was beyond our understanding. Our scientists could have developed similar systems given sufficient time and resources, but because it was so elegantly practical, so ruthlessly efficient. Where our weapons were designed for precision and minimal collateral damage, the human designs were built around a single principle: overwhelming force applied with absolute coordination. They had stripped away every unnecessary component, every aesthetic flourish, every redundant system, and created something that existed purely to destroy. "This is remarkable," Sental said, her scales flushing with the silver-blue patterns that indicated intense concentration. We had gathered in the tactical center with the senior staff who remained, projecting the human schematics onto the central display. The adaptive frequency modulation alone would require months to implement in our existing weapons platforms.
"We don't have months," said Fleet Commander Vorketh, his voice heavy with exhaustion. He had not slept in 3 cycles, coordinating the defense of our remaining core worlds. "The harvesters will reach the sanctuary system in 12 days. If we cannot stop them there will be nothing left to defend."
"You won't need months." Commander Chen had been standing quietly at the edge of the gathering, observing. Now she stepped forward, and the others parted to make way for her with a deference that surprised me. "We brought installation teams, specialists who can integrate these systems with your vessels in a matter of days. All we need is your permission to begin." Vorketh turned to me, his expression caught between hope and suspicion. "High Arbiter, can we trust this? We know nothing of human capabilities. For all we know, this could be a trap." "A trap?" I considered the suggestion. "To what end, Fleet Commander? We are already dying. The harvesters have no need of human assistance to consume us. And if this is some elaborate deception, some scheme to gain access to our technology, then the humans are welcome to whatever they can salvage from our corpses." The words were bitter, but they were also true. We had nothing left to protect except our pride, and pride would not stop the harvesters. "Begin the integration," I said. "Commander Chen, your specialists may have access to whatever they require." She nodded, already moving toward the communication station. "I'll signal the Magellan to begin deployment." I watched her go, feeling something stir in the hollow place where my certainty had once resided. "The Magellan, our support vessel," she said over her shoulder. "It's been holding position just outside your sensor range." "How large a support vessel?" She paused at the threshold. That small smile appeared again, the one I couldn't quite interpret. "Large enough, High Arbiter?" The Magellan emerged from behind the gas giant 3 hours later, and I understood then why the scanners had shown only one contact. It was not because the humans had sent only one ship. It was because the Magellan was equipped with stealth systems that our sensors could not penetrate, systems that should have been generations beyond human capability.
The vessel itself was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long, with a configuration unlike anything in our databases. Where our ships were elegant and organic, curved hulls and flowing lines that reflected our aesthetic philosophy, the Magellan was angular and brutal. Every surface bristled with weapons platforms and sensor arrays. Every line spoke of purpose without pretense. It was not beautiful, it was terrifying. And it was not alone. As I watched, more ships emerged from the shadow of the gas giant. Dozens, then hundreds. They had been waiting there, hidden, since before Commander Chen's shuttle had docked, since before we had even detected her approach. They had been watching us die, and they had not revealed themselves until they were certain we were ready to accept their help.
High Arbiter. Centaur's voice was barely a whisper. The registry files. These vessels aren't just military transports. They're warships, combat vessels.
How many? She consulted her display with trembling hands. Current count is 417, but there are more emerging every minute.
I turned to find Commander Chen standing nearby, watching me with an expression that might have been sympathy. You said your species possessed 200 interstellar-capable vessels.
I said that was your intelligence estimate, she replied calmly. I didn't say it was accurate. How many ships does humanity actually possess? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you remember what you told our ambassador 300 years ago when he asked why you wouldn't share your technology with us?" I remembered. The words had seemed so wise at the time, so measured and reasonable. We told him that humanity was too young to be trusted with power, that you needed time to mature, to outgrow your violent tendencies. Yes, she nodded slowly. And do you remember what he said in response? I searched my memory. The human ambassador had said many things, most of which the council had dismissed as emotional pleading. But there had been something at the end, just before he was escorted from the chamber, something that had stuck with me, though I had never understood why. He said, "We will not forget this, and we will not forgive it, but we will overcome it." He was my great-grandfather, Commander Chen said, Ambassador James Chen. He came home from that council session, and he told my grandmother that the elder races had made a mistake. Not in quarantining us, he understood their fear, even if he didn't agree with it. Their mistake was in underestimating what humans could accomplish when we had no choice but to rely on ourselves. She stepped closer, and I saw in her eyes the weight of generations, the accumulated purpose of 3 centuries of isolation and determination. We built those ships in secret, High Arbiter. Constructed them in asteroid bases and hidden shipyards throughout the solar system. We developed weapons and shields and propulsion systems that your quarantine patrols never detected, because we knew they would never think to look for them. We watched your boundary stations, learned their patterns, and when the time came, we were ready. Ready for what? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. For this. She gestured toward the viewport where human vessels continued to emerge in impossible numbers. For the day when the galaxy would need us. We didn't build this fleet to conquer you, High Arbiter. We built it to save you. 1,200 vessels, Centaur reported, her voice hollow with disbelief. 1,500. They're still coming. I stood in silence, watching the stars fill with human ships, and I felt something I had not experienced in 10,000 years. I felt humbled. The integration process began immediately. Human technicians swarmed over our vessels with an efficiency that bordered on unsettling. stripping out damaged systems and installing their own components with a speed that suggested they had been practicing for exactly this scenario. They worked in shifts, never resting, fueled by stimulants and sheer determination. When our engineers protested that certain modifications would compromise the structural integrity of our ships, the humans simply designed reinforcement systems on the spot and integrated those as well.
They don't sleep, Santal observed, watching a team of human technicians through the observation window. I've been monitoring them for 3 cycles. They rotate personnel, but the work never stops.
Humans have a saying, I replied. Sleep is for the dead. I am beginning to understand what they mean by it.
High Arbiter, she hesitated. May I speak candidly?
You have served me for 3 centuries, Sentinel. I think you have earned that right.
She turned to face me, her silver scales catching the harsh light of the work lamps. We made a terrible mistake, didn't we, with the humans?
Yes, there was no point in denial. We saw their violence, their capacity for destruction, and we assumed that was all they were. We never considered that the same traits that made them dangerous might also make them this.
What are they, High Arbiter? I watched a young human woman, no older than 30 of their years, coordinate the work of a dozen specialists, her movements precise and purposeful, her voice calm as she issued instructions in a steady stream. She had been working for 18 hours straight, according to our records. She showed no signs of fatigue.
I don't know, I admitted. But I am beginning to suspect that we never knew it all.
Commander Chen requested a meeting on the 4th day. She came to my quarters alone, carrying a data tablet and wearing the same simple uniform she had worn since arriving. If she was tired from the endless work of the past days, she showed no sign of it. The integration is proceeding on schedule, she reported. Your fleet will be combat-ready in 2 more days. But I wanted to discuss the strategic situation with you privately.
Please, sit. I gestured to one of the chairs in my quarters. Designed for Velkite anatomy, but humans were adaptable enough to manage. Would you like refreshment?
Thank you, no. She settled into the chair with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to discomfort. High Arbiter, I need to know the full extent of your losses, not the public figures, the real numbers. I was silent for a long moment. The real numbers were something we had not shared, even among ourselves. To speak them aloud would be to acknowledge the totality of our failure. You have access to our tactical databases, I said finally. You can see for yourself. I've seen the data, but data doesn't tell me what you're feeling, what your people are feeling. She leaned forward slightly. I need to understand the emotional state of your civilization if we're going to fight alongside you effectively. It was such a human question, such a human concern, and yet, as I considered it, I realized that no one else had thought to ask. We have lost 63% of our fleet, I said. The words came slowly, each one a wound. 28 core worlds have been consumed entirely. The nursery worlds, where our young were raised in communal creches, were among the first to fall. We have no accurate count of casualties, but our estimates suggest 9 billion dead, perhaps more. Commander Chen's expression did not change, but I saw something shift in her eyes, a deepening. The nursery worlds. Your children? 3 generations of our future, simply gone. The harvesters do not discriminate, Commander. They consume all organic matter with equal efficiency. I felt the old grief rising again, the grief I had learned to suppress because there was no time for mourning. We were so proud, so certain of our permanence, And now? Now you're afraid. It was not a question. Yes, the admission cost me something, but I found I no longer cared. We are ancient, Commander. We have existed for so long that we forgot what fear felt like, and now we are experiencing it for the first time in millennia, and we do not know how to survive it. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "High Arbiter, can I tell you something about humans?" "Please." We've never forgotten fear. In all our history, through every advancement and achievement, we've never been able to escape the fundamental truth that the universe is vast and dangerous and doesn't care about our survival. She met my gaze with those strange predator's eyes, and I saw in them a depth of experience that belied her brief lifespan. Every human alive knows on some level that extinction is always possible, that everything we've built could be swept away in an instant. It's part of our genetic heritage, the legacy of a species that spent most of its existence as prey. That sounds exhausting. It is, she almost smiled. But it's also why we're still here. Fear keeps us sharp. It keeps us building, preparing, adapting. It drives us to become more than we were, because standing still means dying. And yet you came here, to face a threat that has destroyed the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. Of course we did, she said as if it were obvious. Fear doesn't mean running away, High Arbiter. Fear means understanding the danger and facing it anyway. It means doing what needs to be done, even when every instinct is screaming at you to flee. Why? The question emerged again, the same one I had asked when she first offered her help. Why face this danger for us? You could have remained hidden, let the harvesters exhaust themselves on our worlds, and then moved against a weakened enemy. It would have been the strategically sound choice. Commander Chen leaned back in her chair, considering the question with the same careful attention she gave everything. Do you know what my grandfather said to me before I left on this mission? Your grandfather? Ambassador Chen's son. He's 112 years old now, still sharp as ever. He pulled me aside before I boarded the shuttle and he said, "Sarah, remember what we're fighting for, not against. For." She paused. "We're not here to defeat the harvesters, High Arbiter. We're here to save lives, your lives, because that's what we decided humanity should be 3 centuries ago. Not conquerors, not avengers, protectors." I had no response to that. 300 years ago, we had looked at humanity and seen only their potential for destruction. We had never imagined they might choose to become something else. "I think," I said slowly, "that I owe your great-grandfather an apology." "He's dead, High Arbiter. Has been for 2 centuries. Then I will apologize to the species he represented. When this is over. If we survive." "We'll survive." There was no bravado in her voice, no false confidence, just that same steady certainty that seemed to define everything about her. "I didn't come here to watch your civilization die. I came here to prevent it." The final day of preparation dawned on a fleet transformed. Where before our vessels had been elegant expressions of Velketh autistic tradition, now they bristled with human weaponry, brutal, angular additions that clashed with our aesthetic sensibilities but promised devastating effectiveness. Mixed squadrons of human and Velketh ships ran practice maneuvers, their movements coordinated through communication protocols that had been developed in the space of days but functioned as if they had been refined for decades. I stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, watching the display screens that showed our combined forces assembling for the battle to come. The harvesters would arrive in 6 hours, their biomechanical swarms having consumed 3 more systems in their inexorable advance. There would be no retreat from this fight. The sanctuary system contained the last significant population centers of the sovereignty, 200 million civilians who had nowhere else to go. Commander Chen stood beside me, having transferred her flag to my vessel for the engagement. She had argued, convincingly, that unity of command required a single point of coordination, and that the Eternal Vigil had the most sophisticated tactical systems among our remaining ships.
Final count from the integration teams, she said, consulting her tablet. 14,000 vessels combat ready, 8,000 Velketh, 6,000 human.
6,000? I turned to stare at her. You brought 6,000 warships? We brought what we could spare. There are defensive requirements back home that couldn't be neglected. What you could spare? I repeated, dazed. Commander, the entire military fleet of the Sovereignty at its height numbered approximately 40,000 vessels. You're telling me that humanity, in 3 centuries of isolation, built a navy that rivals ours? She met my gaze evenly. We built what we needed to feel safe, High Arbiter. As I said, we never forgot fear. The harvesters emerged from fold space at the outer edge of the system, exactly where our projections had predicted, but their numbers exceeded even our worst estimates. The swarm filled the space between stars, a living darkness composed of millions of individual organisms, ranging from fighter-sized drones to continent-consuming motherships. They moved with perfect coordination, a single vast intelligence distributed across countless bodies, and as they approached, they broadcast no communications, offered no demands. They did not need to. Their purpose was self-evident. All units, this is Fleet Command. Commander Chen's voice carried across every ship in the combined fleet, steady and clear. Engage on my mark. Remember your training. Trust your systems. And trust each other. I watched the displays as our fleet moved to intercept, human and Velketh vessels interspersed in a pattern that maximized coverage and mutual support. The human ships were faster than I had expected, more maneuverable. They darted through the formation like predators themselves, taking positions that our tactical computers hadn't even considered. Mark. The battle began. The first volleys of human weapons fire cut through the harvester vanguard like coherent light through shadow. Where our conventional weapons had splashed uselessly against the harvester's adaptive shielding, the new systems, the ones humanity had developed in secret, in isolation, with no guidance from any elder race, tore through them as if they weren't there. The harvesters reeled, their perfect coordination faltering for a crucial moment as they struggled to adapt to weapons they had never encountered. It's working, Centaur breathed. High Arbiter, it's actually working. But the harvesters were adaptive. That was their nature, their fundamental horror. Even as they died in their thousands, the swarm was learning, adjusting, developing countermeasures. Within minutes, the casualties on both sides began to mount. Human ships died alongside Velketh vessels, their crews consumed by organisms that had already begun to resist the new weapons. They're adapting faster than projected, one of the human tactical officers reported, his voice tight with concern. Shield modulation isn't keeping pace. Commander Chen was already moving, issuing orders that flowed through the combined fleet like pulses through a nervous system. Shift to Protocol 7. All units adjust frequency distribution to pattern Alpha 6. We anticipated this. Execute contingency measures. I watched in fascination as the human ships responded instantly, their weapons shifting to entirely new configurations in the space of seconds.
They had planned for this. They had known the harvesters would adapt, and they had prepared multiple response strategies in advance. It was not simply technology that made them effective. It was forethought, preparation, the paranoid attention to contingency that came from being a species that had never known safety. The battle raged for hours. Ships died on both sides, and I felt each loss as a wound. Velketh crews I had known for centuries, human crews I had barely met, but who fought with the same determination as if they were defending their own homeworld. The displays became a chaos of markers and trajectories, the tactical situation shifting too fast for conscious analysis. I found myself relying on instincts I hadn't used in millennia, the ancient warrior reflexes of a species that had once been prey. And slowly, impossibly, we began to win. The harvester's adaptation was not infinite. There were limits to how quickly even their distributed intelligence could evolve new responses, and humanity had found those limits and exceeded them. Each time the swarm developed countermeasures, the human ships shifted to new patterns, new frequencies, new tactics that pushed the enemy's adaptive capacity to its breaking point.
"They're retreating," Fleet Commander Vorketh reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. "High Arbiter, the harvesters are actually retreating." I looked at the displays, and it was true. The vast swarm was pulling back, its coordination fragmenting as individual organisms began to prioritize survival over aggression. The motherships were withdrawing, dragging clouds of smaller drones in their wake, and the pressure on our lines was easing for the first time since the battle began.
"Don't let them regroup," Commander Chen ordered. "All pursuit-capable units, advance and engage. We end this today." What followed was not a battle. It was a hunt. Human vessels poured through the gaps in the retreating swarm, their weapons finding the vulnerable points that the harvester's flight had exposed. They were relentless, tireless, pursuing the enemy with a determination that seemed almost personal. And as I watched, I understood something that I should have realized centuries ago. Humans were not dangerous because of their capacity for violence. Every species in the galaxy had violence in its nature. Humans were dangerous because they did not stop, because they did not rest, because when they committed to a course of action, they pursued it with a single-minded intensity that knew no compromise and accepted no defeat. The harvesters had consumed a dozen civilizations. They had devoured the Velketh sovereignty's proud fleets, destroyed our homeworlds, slaughtered 9 billion of our people. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, perfectly adapted to consume and survive. And humanity broke them in 6 hours. The last harvester mothership died at the edge of the system, its final scream a psychic wail that echoed through the minds of every sentient being within light years. The swarm was not merely defeated, it was annihilated. Every organism hunted down and destroyed with methodical thoroughness. There would be no recovery, no adaptation. The threat that had brought the sovereignty to its knees was simply gone. On the bridge of the eternal vigil, I stood in silence as the reality of our victory slowly penetrated the fog of exhaustion and grief that had shrouded my thoughts for so long. Around me, Velketh officers wept openly, their emotional control shattered by the impossible deliverance they had witnessed. Human crew members moved among them, offering comfort with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the devastating force they had just unleashed. Commander Chen found me at the observation viewport, staring at the stars that had watched our near extinction with the same patient indifference that showed everything. "It's over," she said quietly. Yes, the word felt inadequate. "Commander, I don't know how to. We owe you." "You don't owe us anything." She shook her head.
This wasn't a transaction, High Arbiter. It was a choice, our choice, freely made.
Why? The question emerged one final time, the same question I had asked again and again since the moment she stepped off her shuttle. You could have let us die. You could have conquered what remained. You could have taken revenge for 3 centuries of isolation. Why save us?
Commander Chen was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to face me, and I saw in her eyes something I had never seen in a human before. Something that might have been compassion, or might have been understanding, or might have been something I had no name for.
My great-grandfather came to you 300 years ago with hope in his art. He believed that the elder races would see humanity's potential, would welcome us as partners in the great work of civilization. And you rejected him. You called his species dangerous, primitive, volatile. You locked us away because you were afraid of what we might become. She stepped closer, and though she was small, though she was fragile, though her lifespan was a fraction of mine, I found myself leaning back, awed by the force of her presence.
He came home from that council, and he made a choice. He decided that he would prove you wrong. Not through revenge, not through conquest, through becoming the thing you should have seen in us all along. He spent the rest of his life building the foundation for what we've become. Not a species that destroys, but a species that protects. Not a species that takes, but a species that gives.
And in 3 centuries, you built all this? I gestured at the viewport, at the debris field that marked humanity's decisive victory, at the fleet of impossible ships that had saved our people.
In 3 centuries, we became ready. She almost smiled. High Arbiter, you were right to fear us, not because of what we were, but because of what we could become. A species that rises from nuclear fire to interstellar civilization in 2 generations. A species that survives every threat, every disaster, every enemy that the universe throws at it. A species that refuses to be destroyed no matter the cost.
And what have you become?
We've become the species that saves others, because someone had to be. Because the universe is vast and dangerous and full of things like the harvesters, and someone needs to stand against them. She placed her hand on my arm, a gesture of connection that transcended the barrier between our species. You asked why we helped you. The answer is simple. We helped you because you needed help, because we could, because that's what it means to be human. I looked at her. This small, fragile creature from an unremarkable world, this representative of a species we had dismissed as primitive and dangerous, and I understood at last what we had failed to see 3 centuries ago.
Humans were not dangerous because of their violence. They were not remarkable because of their technology. They were extraordinary because of their choice. They had been given every reason to hate, to conquer, to destroy, and they had chosen to protect instead. They had been locked away and forgotten, and they had used that time to become something greater than revenge.
They had become worthy of the stars. The quarantine, I said slowly. It is ended. Humanity is welcome among the stars as equals, as allies, as... I paused, searching for the right word. As teachers. Commander Chen's expression softened. Thank you, High Arbiter. But we didn't come here for recognition. We came here because it was the right thing to do. I know. I inclined my head in the deepest gesture of respect my species could offer. That is precisely why you deserve it. Later, much later, when the survivors had been counted and the dead had been mourned, I found myself in my quarters, recording these words for whatever posterity might remain. The sovereignty would survive, though it would never again be what it was.
We had lost too much, too many worlds, too many people, too many certainties to ever fully recover. But we would endure, we would rebuild, and we would do it with the help of a species we had once dismissed as primitive children.
The stars are patient. They burn for billions of years, indifferent to the brief flickers of civilizations that rise and fall beneath their ancient light. But I have learned, in these final, terrible months, that patience is not the only virtue that matters. Sometimes what the universe needs is not patience, but action, not observation, but intervention, not wisdom, but will.
Humanity is not patient. They are young, by our standards, barely a heartbeat in the cosmic scale of things. But they are fierce, and they are determined, and they are relentlessly, impossibly good. They chose to save us when they could have destroyed us. They chose to protect us when they could have conquered us. They chose to be heroes when they could have been gods.
And when the scanners detected one contact, human, then silence, that silence was not the silence of weakness. It was the silence of strength held in reserve. The silence of a species that does not need to announce its power, because its power will announce itself when the time is right. The silence of humanity, waiting in the dark, preparing for the moment when they would be needed.
They were always waiting. They were always preparing. And when the time came, they emerged from the shadows and saved us all.
I am Keth-Varim, last High Arbiter of the Vel-Keth sovereignty. I have lived for 10,000 years, and I have seen the rise and fall of empires beyond counting. But I have never seen anything like humanity. I have never known a species so fierce in their compassion, so relentless in their mercy, so terrifying in their gentleness.
We called them dangerous, and we were right. We called them primitive, and we were wrong. We called them volatile, and we failed to understand that volatility, properly directed, becomes unstoppable force.
They are young, they are fierce, they are human. And I am grateful, beyond all words, that when the darkness came for us, they chose to be our light.
The stars are patient, but humanity is not. And the universe is better for it.